Welcome to ZZ Talk Features. Features are essentially a standalone segment in which I, my co-host, or both of us, invite a guest to speak on a topic in which they're uniquely situated to elaborate on. So today, my guest is someone I've been friends with for over a decade. He's also in law enforcement, and he was gracious enough to sit with me for this interview, in which we hope to discuss a wide range of topics related to the current climate of law enforcement in the United States. Officer Dayne Turner, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. Glad to be here. Technically, it's deputy, sir.
Oh, deputy. Ooh, well, yeah. You know what? That's good you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you if you could just give the audience a brief bio and your current job, your current rank, all that.
Okay. Well, like most people, I was born. Sometime after that, I went to college, graduated. All right, let me quit joking around. But yeah, so I've been in law enforcement. I'm a sheriff deputy. I've been a deputy for 3 years now. Actually, last Friday was my 3-year anniversary. Spent the first part of that working inside the jail. And then the last 8 months, I split that time between serving warrants on the road, and now I'm serving protective orders, TPOs, restraining orders, that sort of thing. I was the top academic in my academy class. So yeah, I got a big brain up here. And one thing that actually, I don't even know if you know this, is Zino, but I'll throw it in there just because I think it gives me a different view of the law than some other, police officers or sheriff deputies or whatever. But when I was about 12, I lived in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. And I don't know if they still do this, but all right, I'll try to give the brief version, but there's some legality as to why they were able to do this. But basically what it boils down to is when I was 12, I got in this program called Youth Court. Basically what it was is they took kids in the community and, you got to be a part of this program. You studied the local laws from Mount Pleasant. You had to take a version of the bar exam and had to pass the bar exam. And then once you passed, it was literally legitimate. You had to pass a version of the bar exam. It was administered by lawyers, judges, all that sort of thing. And once we did that, we were basically certified to practice law for any misdemeanors for any juveniles in Mount Pleasant. So as long as they didn't commit a felony, if they committed a misdemeanor, they came to youth court, which the good thing about it was if they were found guilty, it was expunged from their record. So it was like a do-over, like it never happened. But then if they committed another offense, then instead of going to youth court, they would go to regular family court. And then, if they're found not guilty, it's not on their record. But if they're found guilty, it does go on their record. But it's just one of those cool things that, it was for kids and teenagers being run by kids. Like we had our supervision who were judges and the district attorney for Mount Pleasant or whoever that was, supervising, make sure we would do it all. But literally the court, all the judges in youth court were people that started off as, the clerks and the lawyers that worked their way up to judge. So they were all, high school age. The lawyers, everybody was like middle school, high school age. So it was really cool. So I've kind of had an experience on the side of the law enforcement side and on the judicial side, if you will.
Okay, so essentially you've been interested in and taken part in law enforcement and the judicial side, as you put it, since you were 12 years old.
Yeah,
that's fair to say? Okay. Well, that's good. It makes you even more of an expert.
I wouldn't say expert.
Well, one more thing, one note I should add is prior to starting the conversation, Dana and I discussed, the scope of what we're going to be discussing. And I do want to mention Dana's speaking in his personal capacity, not on behalf of, any department he works for or law enforcement as a whole. This is his opinion.
Yeah. One man's opinion.
Right. Bringing his experiences into the fold. So with that, I'm going to start right with the heavy stuff.
All right, let's go.
So as you know, in the U.S., we've been in the midst of a protest movement since dating back to the end of May, after the video of George Floyd's murder was released. These protests have sort of led to a microscopic focus to law enforcement, more so than any other time in this nation's history. So I wanted to ask you, as both a law enforcement officer and a Black man, how has this whole period in time affected you? How you go about your life? Has it affected you in any tangible way?
The most tangible thing has definitely made things more stressful for me personally. And so all right, let me see if I can verbalize this in a way that makes sense, because it's, as you see right now, like I'm even torn. It's like there's two sides of me that are like, there's a side, I've been a Black man for 30 years. I've only been in law enforcement for 3 years. So it's not like, I'm just gonna say, oh, the police are right in every instance, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I do have a different perspective on things now. So there are certain instances where I'll look and say, okay, there's more info, there's more to the story. There's a reason why certain things are done a certain way. We mentioned George Floyd. I'm gonna go ahead and say this right now. What happened to George Floyd was wrong. Pretty much everybody that I know that's in law enforcement agrees what happened to George Floyd was wrong. What the first thing my mom did after she saw the video, she called me, and she didn't even mention his name. She just said, hey, have you ever been trained to put your knee on someone's? And as soon as she said that, I immediately was like, nope, that was wrong. I was like, we don't get trained like that. That was almost like a day one thing for us. That was like, hey, you don't do this. You don't put pressure on someone's neck, spine area, anything like that. So what happened to him was wrong. And the protests that have been for that, as far as I'm concerned, like I said, what happened to him was wrong. It was murder. I feel like that one. I feel like that one's like a black and white. Like that's an easy one for me, at least.
I do want to touch on that for a second. So you said what happened to him was wrong. You're pretty unequivocal about that. So Derek Chauvin, the officer who put his knee on the neck, you feel like he's in the wrong. What about the other officers who did not intervene? Do you feel like they had a duty to intervene, or whether moral or from an actual law enforcement application, do you feel like they had a duty to intervene?
So this one is, I would say, a bit tougher, if only because two of the guys were brand new, fresh out of the academy. These were their training. Two of them were their training officers, and two of them were learning.
Right. Day 3 and day 4 for two of them, right?
Yeah. So for them, it's one of those things that I've been in that position where, you've got a training officer and you're trying to learn as much as you can. And because, now the job is real. When you're in the academy, it's one thing, you have your scenarios, but there's always that safety net, right? Now you're out on the street and now you're doing the job for real. So you're trying to remember everything you learned in the academy. You're trying to listen to what your training officer tells you. And now you've got this person that has basically been entrusted with training you on how to do the job right. So for those two, it's a tough one because, and someone did ask me this. They're like, well, just looking at that, doesn't that look wrong? And it's like, yeah, if I'm in that situation, I'm at least going to say something. But I can at least understand why the trainees felt like, okay, well, this is what they're telling us. These guys are, you got to remember, when you're a trainee, you kind of look at the person training you as kind of the expert,
Right.
whether it's law enforcement or any sort of, career field. Whoever is training you, you're going to look at them as like, okay, this is the person that I need to be like. This is the person. So if they're doing something and you think, okay, well, that doesn't look right, it's tough to be that guy that says, hey man, that's wrong. What you're doing is wrong. So I think for the trainees, if there's anyone I feel sorry for other than George Floyd in the situation, it's the trainees, because they were in the impossible situation of seeing this happen. And, if they're thinking, I don't know, I think that doesn't look right. It's kind of that catch-22 of, okay, I want to try to say something, but at the same time, my career is in this person's hands. And then, once again, these trainees, they're looking at them as the expert. Let's say George Floyd doesn't die and everything goes according to, you know, I'm not sure what their plan was, honestly, because it's like, okay, you got him out of the car, he's on the ground now. What's the point of putting your knee on his back? Because you got to pick him up at some point and put him back in the car. I'm not really sure what their plan was, but let's say that does happen. He goes to jail, and now the trainee's got to think, oh man, you know, I questioned my FTO. Now the trainer's going to get in his face, and now the trainee's thinking, crap, I've already burned one bridge. So, you know, there's a lot going on there in the mind of the trainee, so that it's really kind of an impossible situation for them. At the same time, though, if you realize that the guy's in trouble and you realize that he is in distress, I feel like as a person, you got to at least say something, speak up, you know, at least be the one to say, hey, are you sure? If nothing else, hey, are you sure he's all right? Are you sure we could be, there's not another way we can do this? Hey, I think he's calm now. Do you want to try to get him back in the car? Hey, you know what? I got control of, you know, something. Sorry, that was.
No. That's fantastic. I just wanted you to elaborate on that. So thank you for doing that. So essentially, the trainees, you feel like they were in a tougher spot because, I mean, this is the training officer. You don't really want to be seen as contradicting your training officer, which is true of any field.
Now,
so,
that's not to say there's ways that you can still intervene without being seen as contradictory, but these guys, like you said, one is day 3, one's day 4, like they don't know that yet. Like they don't know how to, you know, talk to someone and say, hey, and you know, I see you do, hey man, I got him, man, like you look tired, bro, let me take over for you. Oh man, you know what, I'm not sure, hey, how do I call this in here? I'll hold him, you call this in. You know me, I've been in it 3 years now, so I can, you know, come up with some ways to be confrontational without really being confrontational.
right.
Like I can get someone to say, you know, if my goal is, hey, you know what, that guy's being a jerk. I just need whatever I do, I need him to get out of this situation. Hey man, you get me a cup of coffee, or hey man, bro, I think I left something in the car, something, you know. And you know, these guys are fresh out of the academy, rookies. They can't really think and process stuff like that. So for them, it really probably would have had to been if they confronted the FTO, they were going to have to do it, you know, really confrontationally. So it's not to say it couldn't have been done, but I can understand like why they were hesitant to speak up or say something.
Okay. Cool. So I do have an academy question down the line, but prior to that, I want to sort of stay along this line of when an officer sees another officer doing something wrong, and you know what course of action they have. So I'm going to preface this with a little story. I am in this Facebook group called Show Me a Sandwich. Just a shameless plug for that group. Essentially, it's as the name suggests, right? It's people making sandwiches and taking pictures of it and showing it. Now, over the last few months, it's become Show Me a Sandwich with a hashtag showing what they support, right? So hashtag MAGA, hashtag BLM, you know, those kind of things. And one of the hashtags I saw was ACAB, which at the time I actually didn't know what it stood for. And I looked it up on Urban Dictionary, the trustful site.
Yeah.
And I found out that it stood for all cops are bastards, right?
Yeah.
So generally I don't.
Sorry, my cat just jumped on the screen.
Oh, that's
really, dude.
Right. This is
this guy.
The wonders of pandemic interviews.
He wants to be in the interview.
Yeah. So generally, I don't try to comment on all the posts from that Facebook group, but I did see that, and I wanted to respond, right? Because the person who made the post was a white lady, and I responded basically, you know, I appreciate your solidarity for like the Black Lives Matter movement and all that stuff. You know, it's good to know that, you know, we have friends and, you know, people that understand that there's a problem. However, I don't believe all cops are bastards. I think obviously there's a bias because I'm friends with one right here. But I told her I don't believe all cops are bastards because while there's definitely a problem across the country of some cops abusing their power, there are many other cops who go through their entire career without doing something like this. So the person responded quite nicely, actually. She was like, well, I don't care if it's your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, your spouse, whomever, all cops are bastards. The reason being, even though that person isn't the one engaging in that abuse of power or excessive use of force, they work within a system that allows it to breed, and they work within a system that almost punishes you if you try to speak out against that, against the brotherhood, if you will. So my question after that long-winded preface is, what do you think about her understanding of how police departments deal with you know, one member of the brotherhood speaking out against another if they see something wrong? Do you think that's a valid concern, or do you think it's something that's blown out of proportion?
Okay, so I'll kind of preface my answers with a bit of a story, but basically, when I got hired at my agency, they kind of asked us some questions like that. You know, the question was, okay, part of our interview process, you see your partner, you know, take some money off of you know, a drug bust or whatever. You know, we had a couple different questions like that. And at different stages of my career, when I interviewed for different positions, they would ask, you know, okay, you see your partner, you know, gets mad because, you know, an inmate in the jail is talking back to them. You see that person, you know, get mad and smack them and, you know, tell them not to disrespect them, you know, stuff like that. And what I found is, and what I told them was, you know, my personal opinion is that if you see something, you've got to say something to a superior. You've got to report it. You've got to let someone know that, hey, you know, I just saw this person do, you know, whether it's my partner of 10 years or whatever, hey, why are you taking money off of the scene? You got to report it to a supervisor, because at the end of the day, these incidents, you know, where you have these officers, whether it's an excessive use of force, whether it's an unjustified shooting, which is an excessive use of force, if an officer is found stealing, if an officer, whatever the action may be, it creates this tsunami effect where it could be an officer in California, but it creates this tsunami effect where every cop is now seen as, oh, well, you're part of that system. Now, is there some validity to it? That, yeah, I think there is. There's a tendency to what they call it, back the blue, for officers to stick together. Now, part of that mindset and that tendency to support each other comes from just the fact that what you've got to understand about policing and sheriff deputies and doing the job of law enforcement is it's one of those things that's very, very hard to share the stresses of that job with your family. That's if you look at the divorce rate among Leos, it's astronomical. One of the things they always talk to us about every year is the suicide rate among law enforcement officers is much higher than in a lot of other fields. And that's because it's so hard to come home and share with your family that, you know, you had to hold a dying child today, or you had to, you know, you had to go to a domestic where you know that, you know, the husband is beating the wife, but she's doing everything in her power to keep you from taking him to jail when all you want to do is take this guy to jail. So it's very hard to share that with your family and, you know, have that support system. So what tends to happen is you get cops get in groups of buddies with other cops. That's who they can be vulnerable with. That's who understands, you know what, I'm with my group of buddies. I can tell them about my rough day because they'll get it. I can't talk to my wife and kids about that because my wife doesn't want to hear about me, you know, picking up someone's gray matter off the side of the freeway, or, you know, the smell that I'm never going to forget the first time I smelled a dead body that had been decaying for like 2 or 3 days, you know, that's hard to share with your family. So, you know, you get these groups of cops that get in groups, and, you know, that becomes their emotional support group. So then what do we do with any group of friends? Our tendency is to, hey, you know, you're my friend. You were there for me. I'm going to back you up no matter what. And unfortunately, what that creates is it creates this this kind of us versus them mentality, which sort of, you know, you see it play out where the knee-jerk reaction when an officer is charged with a crime, or you see a police officer in the news, is you see a whole lot of officers say, what happened? We want to see the other details. And then they start making excuses. Part of that is going to be, you know, you're going to have guys like me that, like, I try to reserve judgment until I get facts, just because I try not to have a knee-jerk reaction to anything. If a black guy were to shoot a cop in the street, I'm going to be ticked about it, but I also want to say, okay, what were the circumstances? What happened? What was going on? More than likely, if he shoots a cop in uniform, he knew the guy was a cop, and more than likely, it's a crime. Right. But, you know, like I said, I try to not have a knee-jerk reaction to anything. So you're going to have some guys like me that are just like, okay, but the thing about guys like me is we're usually the quiet ones that we just wait for all the facts to come out before we even start posting anything on social media, before we start talking. But then you've got the other guys that when you attack one of them, it feels like you're attacking the whole profession, because they're like, wait, that's my brother over there. That's someone that, you know, maybe I don't know him, but if I were to meet him, I could have a beer with this guy and tell him about all the, exactly, and share my struggle with this guy, and you're attacking him. So the instinct is to protect that person and wrap them up in that cloth and say, nah, bro, we got your back. But there are instances where, you know, that person you're trying to protect is wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's a hard thing for, I think, a lot of police officers or law enforcement officers, is to realize that, hey, it's better for everyone if we, instead of just having this knee-jerk emotional, hey man, you're my, like there's nothing wrong with saying, hey man, you're my brother. I feel your struggle, you feel my struggle. We're together in this, but you've just got to still be able to realize that, hey, if my brother does something wrong, I have to hold him accountable for that. And it's the same thing with your family. You know, my mom told me growing up all the time, she's like, look, I love you, but if you do anything illegal, don't expect me to hide you when the police come here. She's like, matter of fact, I'm going to be the one that dials 911 to turn you in. And she said, and I'm doing it because I love you, because at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. I'm going to hold you accountable for what you do, and it's going to make you a better man for it.
My co-host Zeus sent in a question asking how your precinct handles internal complaints. Your precinct or sheriff's department handles internal complaints, and do you feel that there's room for improvement?
So the funny thing about where I work, and I've told people this, is I work for an agency that it's a good one. I'm not going to say it's perfect. I really love working there. All right, I'll throw the great word out there. I think I work for a great agency. Like I said, it's not perfect. There are things that could be improved, but we could say that about any place of work. One thing about it, though, is if you do something wrong, they're going to hold you accountable pretty harshly. The agency where I work, we've got the sheriff's office and we've got the police department. And both the sheriff's office and the police department, I've heard of excessive use of forces happening, and the officers were fired within days, within 48 to 72 hours of the investigation beginning, and then them being charged and booked into the jail maybe a couple days after that. Once again, we're not a perfect department, but we have an entire investigative division that it investigates a lot of things, but one thing that they do investigate is they investigate deputies that work for our agency. They do a really good job of it. They build their case as well. One thing that they do is if they get a tip from someone that a deputy is doing something wrong, they'll investigate it as if they're a crime has occurred. So they investigate it with the same dedication that they do any other crime. One of the, I think, most important classes that they also teach anytime a new person is hired, they teach it to the new hires in groups, is they teach, because like I said, I work for a sheriff's office, and most sheriff's offices one of their big responsibilities is handling the county jail. So what we do is we put a class on talking about deputies that have brought stuff into inmates, deputies that have had inappropriate relationships with inmates, deputies that have done, you know, all sorts of things. And they put that class on, and it's put on by someone, whoever the commander is in the investigative division at the time. He'll put that class on and he'll point out people and he'll say, okay, I went to the academy with that person and then I had to lock him up. Or this person, I knew this person for 10 years. We couldn't find enough to charge him with a crime, but he no longer works here and we no longer talk. And it's stuff like that. So I feel like my agency does a really good job of it's to the point that we call the you know what, I'm not even gonna mention what we call them, because that might give away where I work. Someone will be like, oh crap, I know where he works now. But once again, I'm just speaking, this is my opinion. I don't want to,
in your capacity.
Yeah. But
okay.
But yeah, we've got, yeah, I feel like like I said, we've got a pretty no-nonsense policy when it comes to excessive uses of force, improper relationships with inmates, anything that, once again, is going to make everybody in law enforcement look bad. So our agency is one of those that if they see something, they're going to address it immediately. Whoever is responsible is going to be held accountable, whether that's by disciplinary action up to or including termination or criminal prosecution. And the DA doesn't necessarily work on the law, you know, that's the judicial side, but we have a DA in our county that is more than willing, if a police officer or a sheriff deputy is found doing something wrong, he is more than willing to prosecute if there's something criminal there.
All right. It's good to hear. I don't know. I don't believe that's the case across the country, but it's good to hear that there are departments and precincts doing it the right way. So